courtroom was packed. Spectators filled the seats, murmuring amongst themselves as they waited for the high-profile case to begin. It wasn't every day that someone as well-known as Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, walked into a courtroom. She was there on official business, called in to testify in a critical legal battle. But what no one expected was that the judge presiding over the case would take it upon himself to publicly humiliate her. The tension in the air was thick as Pam took her seat, her expression unreadable but confident. She had been in courtrooms for years, both as a prosecutor and a public figure, and she knew how to handle pressure. But as soon as Judge Malcolm Reynolds entered, it became clear that something was off. He sat down, adjusting his robe, and the smirk on his face was unmistakable. The proceedings began as usual, with opening statements and procedural formalities. Then it was time for Pam to take the stand. She stood, walked to the witness seat, and swore to tell the truth. As she settled in, the judge leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Well, well," Judge Reynolds said, tapping his fingers against his desk. "Ms. Bondi, I must say it's quite the sight to see you here. I almost didn't recognize you without a camera crew following you around." A few chuckles erupted from the audience. Pam, unfazed, kept her composure. She had dealt with tough judges before, but there was something different about this. It wasn't just skepticism, it was personal. She gave a polite nod. "I'm here as a professional, Your Honor, to provide testimony on the legal matters at hand." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Oh, of course. I just assumed you were here to give one of your famous television appearances rather than, contribute anything substantial to the law." This time, the laughter was louder. Pam's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had no idea why this judge had a vendetta against her, but she wasn't about to be bullied in open court. "Your Honor, if you'd like to discuss my professional experience, I'd be happy to go over my years as Attorney General, but I believe the case at hand is more relevant to today's proceedings." Judge Reynolds leaned back, still smirking. "Ah, yes, always dodging, aren't we? Just like a politician. Answering the questions you want, avoiding the ones that make you uncomfortable." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the attorneys looked stunned at the judge's lack of professionalism. This wasn't just a tough line of questioning. This was outright hostility. Pam exhaled slowly. "Your Honor, I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as a legal expert. If you'd like to continue with the case, I'm more than ready." The judge scoffed. "Legal expert? That's debatable." The courtroom went dead silent. Even those who had laughed earlier were now shifting uncomfortably. No one had ever seen a judge act this brazenly toward a witness, especially not one as high-profile as Pam Bondi. She straightened her shoulders. "I'd like to remind Your Honor that this is a courtroom, not a political debate stage." Judge Reynolds chuckled. "Oh, I know exactly where we are, Ms. Bondi. Do you?" Pam tilted her head slightly, studying him. She had dealt with tough judges, but this was something different. This wasn't just personal, it felt like he had an agenda. Then, just as she was about to respond, the judge did something no one expected. "Frankly, I don't even know why we're wasting our time with you up here. You're just another talking head who thinks she's above the law." Gasps filled the room. One of the attorneys immediately stood up. "Your Honor, I object to the way you're addressing the witness." Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel. "Sit down, counselor. I'll run my courtroom however I see fit." Pam had seen a lot in her career, but this was unprecedented. She looked around and saw that even the court clerks and officers were exchanging nervous glances. Something was wrong. She turned back to the judge, her voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, do you have a legal reason for your hostility, or is this just personal?" That was the moment everything changed. Judge Reynolds' face darkened. "You dare question me in my courtroom?" Pam met his gaze steadily. "I'm questioning whether you're fit to preside over this case." The entire room froze. The judge's face went pale for a split second, before he quickly masked it with anger. He grabbed his gavel as if he was about to strike it again, but his hand was shaking. Then, something clicked for Pam. She had seen that look before, the look of someone who had something to hide. She turned to the attorney who had objected earlier. "Counselor, I suggest you request a recess." The attorney caught on quickly. "Your Honor, I motion for a recess." Judge Reynolds shook his head. "Denied." Pam wasn't backing down. "Then I request to speak with the court bailiff in private, immediately." The judge's hand gripped his desk. "You don't have the authority to make such requests." Pam folded her arms. "Actually, as a legal expert, I do." The judge hesitated, but before he could respond, the bailiff, a stern-looking man, who had been watching everything unfold, took a step forward. "Your Honor, I believe we should allow this discussion." For the first time, the judge looked truly nervous. "There's no need for—" "Now," the bailiff said, cutting him off. Pam stood, and within seconds, she and the bailiff stepped out into the hallway. She turned to him, lowering her voice. "Something's wrong here. This judge is compromised." "These Bailiff frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Pam took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting that Judge Reynolds is unfit to be on that bench, and I think you know why." The bailiff's jaw clenched. "There have been rumors." Pam nodded. "Then it's time we stop whispering and start acting." Moments later, they re-entered the courtroom, and what happened next would be talked about for years. Pam walked straight to the center of the room and addressed the court officers. "By the authority vested in me as a former attorney general, I am making a formal request for an investigation into Judge Reynolds' conduct. Effective immediately." The room erupted into chaos. The judge stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "You have no right." "I have every right," Pam said sharply, "and I suggest you cooperate because you are now under formal scrutiny." The bailiff stepped forward, looking at the judge. "Your Honor, I think you should come with me." The judge turned red with fury. "This is outrageous. I am the law in this courtroom." Pam took a step closer. "Not anymore." Within minutes, court officers moved in. The audience sat in stunned silence as Judge Reynolds was led away, still shouting about his power and authority. But in the end, none of it mattered. The system he had abused was finally turning against him. And Pam Bondi? She stood tall, unshaken. Once again, she had proven that justice was not about status, ego, or power, but about truth. As Judge Reynolds was escorted out of the courtroom, the weight of what had just happened settled over everyone. The gavel that had once symbolized his absolute authority now lay abandoned on the bench, a stark reminder that no one was above the law, not even a judge. Pam Bondi took a slow, measured breath as she turned to the attorneys and the spectators, her expression calm but resolute. The courtroom had been stunned into silence, and for a moment, no one knew what to do. Then murmurs began to ripple through the crowd, whispers of disbelief, curiosity, and even a touch of admiration. One of the attorneys, still standing, looked at Pam. "Ms. Bondi, I have to ask, did you know this was going to happen?" Pam shook her head. "No, but I knew something was off the moment he started his tirade." She glanced at the bailiff, who was now speaking in hushed tones with another court officer. The way he acted, the hostility, it wasn't just bias, it was fear. That's when I knew he was hiding something. The prosecutor in the case. A sharp-looking man with graying hair stepped forward. "Well, Ms. Bondi, I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude. Judge Reynolds' behavior has been questionable for a long time, but no one has been bold enough to challenge him so directly." Pam gave a slight smile. "It wasn't about boldness, it was about justice, and I have a feeling this isn't over yet." As if on cue, a court officer approached, holding a folder with a serious expression. Ms. Bondi, may I speak with you privately? Pam nodded and followed him to a quieter corner of the courtroom. He handed her the folder, his voice low. We've been investigating Judge Reynolds for a while now. There have been whispers of corruption, but we never had concrete proof. Pam flipped through the documents. Financial records, suspicious rulings, hidden transactions, things that painted a picture of a judge who had been abusing his position for far longer than anyone realized. The officer continued, Your confrontation with him today might have been the final push we needed. We just got confirmation from the state attorney's office. An arrest warrant is being processed as we speak. Pam raised an eyebrow. An arrest warrant? That quickly? The officer nodded. They've been waiting for a reason to move. On him. Today gave them that reason. Pam exhaled. This wasn't just about an arrogant judge losing his temper. This was about deep-rooted corruption finally being exposed. Another officer approached, speaking urgently. He's resisting. Pam's eyes narrowed. Where? In the hallway. He's refusing to go quietly. Without hesitation, Pam walked briskly toward the courtroom doors, pushing them open. The sight before her was one she had seen too many times in her career. A man in power, unwilling to accept that his time was up. Judge Reynolds was standing against the wall, his face red with fury. The court officers had him surrounded, but he was pointing his finger at them, yelling, You have no right! I am a judge! This is a mistake! One of the officers, his patience clearly wearing thin, said, Sir, you need to cooperate. We have orders from the state attorney's office. Reynolds shook his head. You're making a mistake. I can explain all of this. That woman! He turned sharply, his eyes landing on Pam. This is her doing. She's always been a political hack. She set me up. Pam stepped forward, her expression unreadable. No, Judge. You set yourself up. He sneered. You think you're some kind of hero? You think you can just waltz in here and destroy my career? Pam's voice was calm but firm. I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself the moment you decided the law didn't apply to you. Judge Reynolds' breath was coming fast now, his hands clenching and unclenching. This isn't over. I have connections. You'll regret this. Pam tilted her head slightly. You just threatened a former attorney general in front of multiple law enforcement officers. You might want to reconsider your approach. For the first time, the weight of the situation seemed to hit him. His eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but there was none. The officers moved in, placing handcuffs around his wrists. This is a mistake, he muttered, his voice quieter now. Pam watched as they led him away, his protests growing weaker with each step. She had seen many men like him before, men who believed they were untouchable, who thought they could manipulate the system forever. But the law had a way of catching up. She turned to the bailiff. What happens next? He sighed. An official. Investigation. Likely charges of corruption, abuse of power, obstruction. It'll take time, but he won't be wearing that robe again. Pam nodded. Good. She walked back into the courtroom where the spectators were still talking amongst themselves, the weight of what they had just witnessed sinking in. She could see the respect in some of their eyes, the realization that justice had been served, even when it seemed impossible. As she gathered her things, one of the younger attorneys approached her. Ms. Bondi, I just wanted to say, that was incredible. You stood up to him when no one else would. Pam smiled slightly. It wasn't about standing up to him. It was about standing up for what's right. The attorney nodded, clearly inspired. Well, I won't forget it. Pam glanced around the room one last time before heading for the exit. Outside, the sky was clear, the sun shining down on the courthouse steps. She took a deep breath, knowing that today had been more than just another case. It had been a reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, always found its way. As she Walked down the steps, she could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Somewhere, Judge Reynolds was being booked, his life unraveling in a way he never expected. Pam Bondi had seen justice served many times before, but this time, it felt different. This time, she had reminded everyone in that courtroom, and beyond, that the law was bigger than any one person. And no matter how powerful someone thought they were, the truth always had a way of coming out. As Pam Bondi stepped outside the courthouse, the crisp air filled her lungs. The weight of what had just transpired was still heavy, but she carried it with ease. She had faced corruption before. This was nothing new. What mattered was that justice had been set in motion. A group of reporters had already gathered on the courthouse steps, cameras flashing as they spotted her. She wasn't surprised. A sitting judge being arrested was national news. Within hours, the headlines would be plastered across every major outlet. One reporter, a young woman with a determined look, stepped forward. "Ms. Bondi, can you comment on what just happened in there?" Pam adjusted her blazer, her voice steady. "I think the events speak for themselves. No one is above the law, no matter their title or position. Today was proof of that." Another reporter jumped in. "Did you anticipate Judge Reynolds' arrest before today?" Pam shook her head. "I didn't walk into that courtroom expecting an arrest, but I did expect professionalism, and when I saw something was wrong, I followed my instincts. This isn't about me. It's about accountability." A male reporter pushed his microphone closer. "What do you think this means for the justice system? A judge being arrested is a serious matter." Pam met his gaze. "It means that our system still works. It means that people who abuse their power can and will be held accountable. And it sends a message to anyone who thinks they can manipulate the law for their own gain. Your time will come." The questions kept coming, but Pam remained poised. She knew the media would spin this in every direction, but the facts were undeniable. Judge Reynolds had been caught, and the system was finally doing what it was meant to do. As she answered the final question, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. A familiar face stepped out. James Callahan, an old friend and former colleague from her Attorney General days. He walked toward her, his expression unreadable. "Pam," he greeted her with a nod. That was quite the spectacle in there. Pam smirked. "Just another day in the office." James shook his head. "I don't think you realize just how big this is. Reynolds wasn't just any judge. He had friends, powerful ones. And some of them won't be happy about what just happened." Pam crossed her arms. "Let them be unhappy. I did what needed to be done." James studied her for a moment before nodding. "You always do. But you need to be careful. This could go deeper than you realize." Pam sighed, glancing back at the courthouse. "I have a feeling we're only scratching the surface." James's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it briefly before looking back at her. "The state attorney's office is already moving. There's talk of opening a full investigation into Reynolds' past rulings and financial dealings. If what we suspect is true, this could take down more than just one judge." Pam's mind was already racing. She had suspected Reynolds was compromised, but if there were others involved, this could unravel into something much bigger. She exhaled. "Good. Let's get to the bottom of it." James chuckled. "I figured you'd say that." He gestured to the SUV. "Come on, let's debrief somewhere a little less public." Pam hesitated for a moment, taking one last look at the courthouse. Justice had been served today, but she knew this was far from over. As she slid into the passenger seat of the SUV, she felt a sense of certainty wash over her. The fight wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Because when it came to justice, she never backed